Councillor Paulson, I like the color of your shirt.
Team shirts.
Everybody else will get the memo next time.
Yep, there you go. Purple is it. We'll be the plum team.
Okay, council, it is 2 p.m. so we will call to order our regular meeting of council and start by acknowledging that we're holding our meeting on the unceded territories of Sechot and Hoopachesset First Nations. Council, we have an agenda in front of us. Are there any late items to add? Councillor Solda.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to do item M1 new business under new business, notice of motion, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Are you okay adding that when we get to new business?
Yes, please.
Perfect. That's great. Any other items to add from council? Okay, seeing none. Any items from the city clerk?
Yes, Madam Mayor, 2 items. Amend the agenda to consider 2 items under report from in camera. Item number 1 would be an appointment to the Advisory Planning Commission. And the second is release of information as it relates to correspondence from the Alberni Waterfront Employers Association.
Thank you. I have added those as well as the new business item. Okay, with that, would somebody like to move approval of our agenda as amended?
Move as amended.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Poon, seconded by Councillor Solda. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. And we have minutes from the special meeting held at 9:30 a.m. and the regular meeting of council held at 2 p.m. on February 8th.
Move to adopt.
Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Poon. Are there any questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. And on to public input period, which is an opportunity for members of the public to submit input on topics of relevance to council. Director of Corporate Services, do we have any input today?
No, we do not, Madam Mayor.
And just a reminder to members of the public, there are 2 opportunities to speak during council meetings. You can arrange that by emailing council@portalberni.ca, and you can speak either at the beginning or at the end of meetings, and can submit input to be read aloud as well. We'll move on to our first delegation then is committee members from the 2026 BC Summer Games Bid Committee. Okay, and we've got those members signing on now. Hi, Suzanne.
Hi.
Great, so we're ready for you. I will pass it over. For delegations, we usually give 10 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions at the end as well. So looking forward to hearing from you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I see Gavin is just coming in there. So I'll start by just introducing myself briefly, and then maybe we'll watch the video that the bid committee prepared, and then we can maybe make a few more comments about the process of working on the bid committee. So my name is Suzanne Dubé, and I grew up in Port Alberni out Beaver Creek, and I recently moved back to Port Alberni after 30 years away living in Victoria. So I'm really excited to be back. I'm excited about the potential of Port Alberni and the revitalization with a new economy. As a financial advisor, I've opened an Edward Jones branch here at the Chamber of Commerce. So opening a new business and during COVID, that's always interesting. And I was just one of the volunteers, along with Gavin, who you'll hear from as well, working with staff, with Willa and Sean and Karen and Councillor Ron Paulson on the BC Games Committee bid package. So maybe we could show the video to council, and then we can make a few more comments. Okay, great. So, so the video wasn't a mandatory part of the package, but we wanted to create something that would give it a real wow factor. So our committee started to work together in October, and we decided to submit the bid for the summer July 23rd to 26th summer games. The deadline was February 19th, and we made that deadline, and the package was submitted. And we look forward to hearing the results sometime this summer. I got involved because I thought after 22 years, it would be 22 years since Port Alberni hosted the BC Games. And I wanted to support the bid because I felt like, especially after this time of COVID, it was time for Port Alberni to step up and have an exciting and revitalizing event like this one in the community. I know council will be very familiar already with the many benefits of hosting the games, from the direct economic impact, the opportunity to showcase our community and athletes to participants, and all the indirect, as well as the legacy to the sporting organizations from the fundraising that happens. I was pleased to invest some volunteer time to submit this bid. Our committee worked hard to present the very best case possible for Port Alberni, because we are competing with many other communities. And as we talked with people in the community about hosting the games, we were really pleased and overwhelmed with the positive support and interest from volunteers, sports organizations, and businesses. And that was evidenced by the 50+ letters of support that we got. So I wanted to turn it over to my colleague, Gavin, who is also on the committee, for some of his comments and his perspective on working on this committee and the games. So I'll leave it over to you, Gavin.
Thank you. Sorry for just being a little bit late, just wrapping up our last little bit of class time here at the school. So I'm pretty lucky that Mr. Southers let me go for 5 minutes early just to start up with the meeting. So I'm one of the teachers here at the high school, and I coach the boys rugby program here. And I'm also involved with the Port Alberni Black Sheep, kind of on their board of directors and kind of one of their youth advisors for their program. So Willa kind of approached me back in October to join the volunteer group to try and create our bid. And I'm just pretty excited about it because, being an athlete that did get a chance to go to BC Summer Games, I think it's a pretty special opportunity that we can provide for our young athletes in the Valley here to, actually have a chance to, compete not only at BC Summer Games, but in one that we kind of host here in our community. And I definitely agreed with that with our group that the Summer Games would definitely showcase Port Alberni kind of in a better opportunity to, highlight our strong points rather than kind of the Winter Games where it'd be a little bit less awesome. With our committee, we kind of think that we thought that we'd have so many good venues, and kind of with all the support that we had with all the letters of support, we've had everyone was, the feedback was tremendous, right? With all the support, and we definitely think that we can, provide a great opportunity to host the games, and I think it'd be a real highlight, a real way to showcase our community. Looking forward. So as an athlete that did get a chance to go to the games, that was in 2010 in Langley. It was kind of, something that was pretty amazing, seeing, that many athletes all kind of there, and how organized and how well run it was. And I think definitely in Port Alberni, a little bit of a smaller community, a little bit tighter knit community, we'll have the ability to, create a little games village is kind of what hope is. I think we'll definitely be able to, create a meaningful, lifelong experience for these young athletes from not only our community, but kind of throughout the province. And I think 2026, kind of looking to the future, hopefully there are a little bit more normal times and better times moving forward. And that should, give us, good opportunity to build all the facilities or adjust the facilities as needed. But not much needs to be built, as we do have some world-class facilities here in the Valley. That's kind of it for me.
Okay, well, I want to just really thank you both, as well as Councillor Paulson and the other committee members and staff who have put a lot of time into this. When this was initially brought to us, I think every member of our council was very excited to see what the potential could be. Port Alberni is a fantastic host community and, has been known for that for a long time, and largely because of the volunteerism that does exist in this community. I love the video you've put together. You guys have just done a fantastic job, and it's a great way to highlight our community and probably really gives us an edge in submitting that application. So thanks for the time you've put into this. Council, are there any questions or comments? Councillor Paulson.
I too want to just thank everybody that was involved in this whole process, and in particular staff that pulled together that video. I don't know if anybody can see, but this is the hard copy of the bid package, and it's quite detailed from accommodation to each and every venue. Tells you what the venue is, its capacity, those sorts of things. And I think more than anything else for me, I'm really excited, I think, for the opportunity to develop a new generation of volunteerism in the Valley. Many of the volunteers that did the games in 2004 and at the last part of the last century have aged out. And I think it's not that they're not
Yourself, Councillor Paulson.
but I think it's a great opportunity. I think we will see a new generation of volunteers and young professionals involved in, if we get the bid, which I'm confident we will.
Thank you very much, Councillor Paulson. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was reading the other day, Victoria is putting out a lot of bid applications for a number of different games because they're trying to revive tourism in the area post-COVID. So I think this is certainly going to help us as well. And I just want to echo your thoughts as well. Thank you so much for the committee work that you've done and the staff, that input that they've had. So it looks like a fantastic bid package. So thank you for all your effort. And speaking as a mother of an athlete, my daughter still says to this day, and she reached the Team Canada level, the BC Winter Games were the most fun that she's ever had in an event. So speaking for young people, it is just a great, fun opportunity for them and hopefully the start of their athletic careers. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Any other comments? Okay, well, just again, want to thank you both for taking the time to be here today. But as well, please do extend our thanks to all of the committee members. Really exciting to see this being pursued, and fingers crossed that we're successful. Thanks again. Okay, Council, we will move on to our next delegation. We have the Owl's Path Tiger's Eye Advisory Group here to present their plans for a new Newchannel Cultural Center.
Hello.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, Mary. So Mary and Joel, I'll turn it over to you guys, and you can just introduce the people that you have on with you.
Awesome. Perfect. So hello, everybody. Thank you for having us here today and allowing us to present on the Newchannel Cultural and Interpretive Center project. I'm Mary Mason, the co-founder of the Owl's Path Tourism and Talk Canada Foundation, along with my partner, Joel Marriott. I'd like to introduce you to our project manager, Denise Young. Some of you may know her from a few years back when she was instructing the tourism ambassador course that we had done here. And we also have Scott Geary with us here today as well. And he's from the First Nations Education Foundation. Sorry, I have my 3-year-old here. And so Scott was one of the leads with the language revitalization poll. Denise here. Just waiting. Oh, there she is. We're just going to set up and get to our first slide. Excellent. And okay. So we have been in the Alberni Valley for 7 years now. And this project is a project that has been long overdue. We've talked to a few different organizations that have had previous attempts towards a New Channels Cultural Center. However, I presume that the timing just wasn't right. But I feel that now definitely is the time. Here, this is an overview of our project team, our project working team, with some of our skills that will directly relate to completing the project, as well as key responsibilities. So I have a background in hospitality, customer service, marketing, and business administration, while Joel grew up in an entrepreneurial family where he gained experience in management, marketing, and media. We had asked Denise to be our project manager as she has a very skilled background in communications, strategic planning, and project management. And we asked Scott and the First Nations Education Foundation to join in as collaborators in the project. So our design concept. We have a vision of a multi-level building structure that offers economic opportunity for generations to come, that will bring people together. Each floor will have something different to offer. The bottom 2 levels of the building would be for undercover parking. That would serve as a precautionary level in case of a flood or tsunami. The next floor up would be a public market that would have a fish selling opportunity in it for local and fishermen, with merchant retail spaces as well. We were thinking along the lines of Pike's Place or Granville Island for that floor. And then another floor would have office spaces and a boardroom for rental options and for membership holders to use at a discounted price. Sorry. The second highest level would be the Cultural Interpretive Museum. And that would be a place to showcase Sushot and Guest Nations arts, culture, and history. This space would be temperature controlled so that any reclaimed artifacts can be housed here and showcased for educational purposes. We have reliable contacts who have built museum exhibits around the world, including exhibits at the Royal BC Museum, as well as the Incomeep establishment in Osoyoos. So that consists of the cultural center, a resort, an RV park, as well as the vineyard. And lastly, the top floor, which would have the best view of the inlet, would be for conventions. And that would be with a capacity holding approximately 1,000 people, which would be well over 3 times the amount that's available in the city of Port Alberni currently. So these are a few of the options that we've been looking at. Number 1 is the vacant parking lot adjacent to Jack's Tires, which happens to be Sushot's traditional wolf territory. That is our number 1 ideal spot. And we've been talking with Sushot in how that will work. Number 2 was actually a suggestion by Ken Watts, and that would be the Port Alberni Dog Park, right at Solda's there. And then our third option was the green space above the train tracks, right across the street from the train station. The first choice, we were thinking it would be an ideal location, considering it's right in line with the mural that was just installed, as well as Tyee Landing, and then the possible, I think you guys were talking about a walkway connecting to Victoria Quay. So that ties both sides of the city in very nicely and brings up the Indigenous presence in Uptown area. Okay, So here, this is actually the Cultural Center in Whistler. Our idea was to have a building made mostly of wood, concrete, and glass. We do know that construction with wood the prices have gone up. However, there is a company in Vancouver that's called Unbuilders, and what they do is they reclaim and refurbish ancient wood from demolition sites, and that can be utilized into it. Joel had a fantastic idea that because it is in Sashot's wolf territory, that atop of the building there would be 4 wolves, kind of like gargoyles, but to stand in protection of the building and the community. And on the top right-hand side, you can see that would be like the convention area. And you can imagine all of the awesome events that could be there. Local community could rent that space. And then we could also have cultural events in there, which would be fantastic. And as I mentioned before, that would be on the top floor. So it would have a beautiful, beautiful view of the inlet. This is a few examples of what would be, or what's demonstrated in the cultural interpretive level. So you see, you could have beach keepers and knowledge keepers, as well as ambassadors, for example, that could share about the history, about the area and traditional practices, plus reasons of celebrating today, including the resilience of Indigenous people and reasons of celebrating today. So there's lots of very talented people in the area. So things like that could be addressed and celebrated. There's also multi-levels within that level, which is kind of cool. In this picture, it shows a few different totem poles and a canoe and different artwork. So that would all be able to be shown throughout this level as well. So these images here are inspiration from the Niska Museum. This is to show the different learning styles that visitors can experience. So on the bottom left photograph here, that showcases that you can have written stories where people can just read as they would like to. On the top right-hand side, there's visual arts, and on the bottom right-hand side, you could have audio, more technological pieces and interactive stations. You also see that in the center of this photo, there is a totem pole inside the building. This would be a perfect opportunity to house the language revitalization pole. It would be safely housed inside, preventing the preventing the artwork from being damaged from natural elements outside. But it would also preserve the art, the importance of language, and the lessons tied to it. This would draw a huge audience to come in specifically just for that. For example, Joel was talking a bit about a totem pole that was raised up north, and it was a huge event. They had the royals come out there, and they actually got to paint the pole, and so it became like a very worldwide event. And I feel that this definitely could be something to that effect. These photos are of, well, the one on the left is Granville Island. Many of you have probably been there. The public market would offer a space for local artisans to set up shop. It would give a space for local fishermen to sell their catch. And this space would be designed with COVID in mind. So guests could enter in one side and then walk through the whole establishment and then exit through one end. Markets like Pike's Place and Granville Island are world renowned, and they have tourists traveling there time and time again, specifically just to go see that and experience that. And this would also add a nice warm space for our local artisans, while providing a revenue stream from rental fees that would go back into the building. And ideally, we would like to fill these spaces with Indigenous owned businesses, crafters, and merchants, but it would be open to everyone as well.
Okay, thanks, Mary. So what I'm going to be doing now is going over some of the specific project details. So what we do is we kind of did an initial planning and we kind of put together kind of a high-level project plan. So we decided we would kind of divvy this up into 4 different phases. So the first phase is our planning stages, right? Which of course is securing the land, feasibility plan, creating our business plan, as well as securing funding and designing the building. We put these timelines in, but of course, as we know, right, when you're building something, things can get delayed, right? So of course, this is kind of if in a perfect world, everything goes as we kind of have initially planned it. The second phase then is, of course, the construction phase. So this is going to be about prepping the land. The environmental study, once we get the land, could fall into that phase 1, or it could fall into phase 2, depending on of course, where it is and things. And then, of course, the actual construction of the building, as well as any post-construction, which includes, of course, the licensing and things like that. Then the third phase is going to be building the interior. So what do we actually need to create it so it's ready for the opening? So this is going to be getting our sponsorships. It could be leasing out the revenue space, or the office space. It could be, looking at getting restaurants in there and all of our other revenue generating pieces. That's that phase. And then of course, the last phase, which is going to be the, one of the most exciting ones, will be the operational plan and how are we actually going to prep for the grand opening, and including how we're going to staff it, what's the communication plan, and how we actually going to make sure that the building is running efficiently and effectively, so we are continuing to generate the revenue. So the cost that we're initially projecting, and of course, as we know, again, that this could be, based on, when we do the feasibility study, that we might have to change materials, we might have to change the way that, how much space we can use, but projected on what Mary presented earlier about the overall concept, we're estimating it's $20 to $25 million. And we base this on about $300 a square foot for building it. And then this also includes, we want to have the building LEED certified. So of course it's in line with the environmental standards. So you might be asking, how are we going to raise this $25 million? Well, we kind of came up with a few different ideas, and this is actually going to be very simple right now. But of course, once we get our business plan, feasibility plan, then of course, we're going to have a whole thing around capital investment. But these are some of the things that we were thinking at the time, right? Is that involving some of the other, of course, all 14 nations, and they do have a percentage of their gaming revenue, or we could do a membership buy-in. Of course, the city of Port Alberni, right, that we are looking at potential leasing of the land and or a funding donation. Community, we're looking at membership buy-in, in-kind donations. Grants, we looked at, we've actually applied for this one, which is the Indigenous Cultural Heritage Infrastructure Grant. And we are going to be seeing if we're going to receive that amount probably in the next week. We applied for $400,000 on that. We also have, other potential grants are the Aboriginal Entrepreneurship Program, the Canadian Heritage Fund, the TD Bank of Canada under their Community Investment Fund. Then a big piece too that we're looking at, and it could be sponsorships or investment, but it could be, that we're looking at different ideas, again, about naming the building, naming each floor. And when the building is built, we're also going to have, it's probably going to be in our visitor center, where we're going to have a sponsorship wall. And it's going to say whether it's individual or organizations. So these are kind of all the different ways that we're looking right now of potential funding. And then, of course, doing fundraisers. So right now we're very fortunate that we've had really good feedback and extremely positive feedback from the stakeholders in the community. As you see on the list here, there's quite a few. You know, Pat Deacon, of course, wrote us a really nice letter as well as the Economic Development Officer. The other thing that we want to really mention that we think is a really good support too is that so Isaac Marsearle, he's actually with Aldridge Pears and Associates, and he's actually built. They were responsible for helping to build the Culture Center in Osoyoos. And what they're doing is that they're really interested in our project because we're kind of at that initial research stage. So what they're doing is they're actually going to be coming in with a whole team of architects, you know, to kind of land strategies, to kind of maybe look at the 3 different, you know, areas that we're thinking of and kind of assess it. So they're coming in from Calgary, and it's going to be in the next week. So we're very excited about that. And of course, also we have, you know, a couple local people. We have tours in Vancouver Island. And we also have, of course, Scott Jury, who's on the line that Mary introduced earlier. He's with the First Nations Education Foundation. And what I'm going to do is quickly pass it off to him, and he's just going to talk about where he sees this supporting his organization. So Scott.
Thanks, Denise, your worship, and councillors. I'm really kind of winging it here. We are definitely supporters of the project, as it does seem it has an opportunity to actually come to fruition. For us, we very much are looking for purposeful space where we can do our work. I know we're associated with the language revitalization pole, but the primary focus of our work is engaging in what's called rapid word collection, where we work with a community. There's quite large numbers to rapidly build a corpus and then do digital archiving and that type of work. And you need a lot of space for that. So right now, you know, the work that we're doing in Kitimat, obviously right now is remote, but they do have large space up there. We don't have that kind of space right in Port Alberni, which is an ideal location considering the entire Nuu-Chah-Nulth community kind of uses Port Alberni as a hub. So if we want to conduct that type of work, it would be extremely efficient to be able to bring people into that area. Going into community there just is not large enough space. We'd rather not do all the work in Victoria, for example, or in Vancouver, because again, a lot of costs involved in travel and accommodation to do that. Office space, yeah, we would definitely need some space. This is where we would like to set up our head office. And our archiving work and digitization work needs secure space in order to do that, as well as a very rapid contemporary, you know, fiber optic connections, which again, we don't have right now because we have to move around a lot. So I got to think too, FPCC is looking for space to run programs and events. I can hardly wait. And then finally, the idea that we actually do have a reasonable place, a viable space to raise this language revitalization pole is very exciting. The support from the local community was loud to have it stay at home, but we didn't really have a place to put it. So this is an extremely exciting option for that for us as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. So moving along, some of our, I guess, next steps, and we're kind of looking at this from a perspective of what do we actually need right now to get this project going. So the first one is securing the land. And because this kind of ties into the second one, which is applying for grants. And what we're finding is that a lot of the grants we can't really apply for yet because we don't have any land, you know, that we can actually, you know, confirm. And then the last one is securing funds for startup costs. So, what we're doing right now is that, our project team right now, we believe in this project. So we are working, we're working, I guess you're going to call it pro bono right now. But when we're looking at all the other different pieces, and it's not only, for us, but it's also about, the architects that might be coming in to start the initial feasibility study and the business plan. So we're guessing that it's going to be, we kind of lowballed it, about 400,000 to 500 is what our guess is to kind of really start the really key pieces of getting this cultural center built. So I guess with that in mind, what our ask is, right, is that, there's a few things here, but what we did is in that briefing package that we gave you, there is a stat in there that is for, Destination BC, which is saying, potential market of, just over 6 million international visitors was identified as having interest in visiting Indigenous cultural tourism experiences in British Columbia in the next couple of years. Of course, understanding with COVID and things like that this is going to be a potential, issue, and probably the numbers are going to go down for that. But we really feel that we have the concept, the revenue model, the need for space. The Royal BC Museum, wants to give back the artifacts. We have amazing reputable, artifacts that are going to be coming back, ability to sell the facility based on the demand, even with the conferences that we are predicting that just based on, usually corporate events run from 20 to 30,000. So even if we got, a few, that $100,000 to $200,000 a year alone in conferences, of course, after, after everything opens up, revenue generation for this is very viable. The only thing is that we need, I guess our key first step is really securing the land. And then other things is that, if you're aware of any funding to support feasibility or the business, please let us know. And we're also creating an advisory committee to keep all stakeholders, because we just feel that this is a community project. We want all stakeholders involved. So what's going to be happening when the architects come out to visit is that we've already had a few counselors from Shashalta actually coming, and we would love to have a couple people on your team, as well as, of course, Pat Deacon come to the meeting with the architects when they come out here. And then ongoing, that we want we want this advisory committee, and whether it's a month or every month or something. And then, of course, these meetings, to respect everybody's time, would be done during business hours. So we would really like to thank each and every one of you for hearing our presentation. And we would like to, I'm not sure how much time we have, but maybe I guess I'll pass it back to you, Mayor Sherry, and you can just let us know what, questions or concerns or anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all of you for the work you've done on this project. I will start by just saying that it is a beautiful concept. It is something I think we would, be absolutely incredibly proud to have in our community. So yeah, I'm thrilled that someone is working on it. Before I go to counselors, I do have, the main concern that I hear hearing your presentation is that there was very minimal reference to Hupachesit. And of course, it sounds like you're working closely with Sashot, which is fantastic, but for projects within the city on the traditional and unceded lands of Sashot and Hupachesit, we like to see really strong engagement and support from both nations, not just one. So if you're able to just comment on the work you've done with Hupachesit, that would be appreciated.
Sure. We've actually sent out a few different emails to them. I've sent emails to the counselors that are in office currently. I'm still waiting on a response from them. However, I will keep at it and maybe just give them a call as well. But we're eager to hear back from them, and we would love to have their support and their input on this project as well.
Thank you. And then I think another important piece is your preferred piece of land the city doesn't own, just so you know. So yeah, we can't help, we can't help give land that that isn't ours. But overall, I think this is a fantastic concept you've come up with. And there's a lot of things in there that, are in our strategic plan as a council as well. So there's certainly a lot of overlap. Council, questions, comments, Councillor Haggard, and then Councillor Paulson and Councillor Washington.
Great, thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I want to say this is such a wonderful concept, and it would be such a huge asset to our community. But just a small warning regarding your stats to visitors. From all the information that I've read in workshops I've attended, they're predicting it's going to take probably 3 to 5 years post-COVID to reach those pre-COVID levels of tourism. So it's going to be a slow start for you, so just be cautious. And also my business line was taking over and I was watching your presentation. You may be able to come up with the initial building costs, but don't forget about your ongoing operational costs, because that is a huge building. So the ongoing operational costs are going to be very expensive. So make sure that you can get those costs covered. So write a really good business plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Paulson.
I too, this is a very, very exciting concept. And for anybody who's been to Oahu and has seen the Polynesian Cultural Center, that's kind of the vision I have. Maybe not that large, but I think this is an incredible initiative and to represent the New Channel culture on the West Coast here is incredible. Just a little bit anecdotally, I was exposed to the absolute thirst for Europeans for First Nations culture here on the West Coast. And the first time was during U17, and through the Russian interpreter, he told me that First Nations culture was one of the prime reasons that they actually came to the island for that event. And more recently, when we hosted Kazakhstan and Switzerland, the Swiss coach, before the drummers and singers did their opening ceremony for that, asked if he could come to the dressing room, and the actual drummers and singers did a couple of songs for him there. But it's that actual thirst, like they want to be able to touch the culture, they want to experience it. And I think this is the best way in the world to present that, not only just to get the 1 or 2 million people that drive through our community, but there are external markets that would love to be a part of that. And I'm excited for you guys, an excited project. I know there's lots of hurdles ahead. Construction, I will say that my nephew works for the unbuilders.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Dan,
Cool.
Dan is a fellow that will go around to communities, and he'll actually do a presentation on what they do, but also do estimates on building buildings and stuff. And also our community has a couple of projects on the go with regards to energy efficient buildings.
Mm.
And Port Alberni is kind of one of the leading communities in that area right now. And I just throw it out there. It's an interesting concept. So anyway, I could go on forever, but I'm really excited about the project. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for indulging me, and good luck, you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Awesome presentation. Looking forward to that 1,000-person convention center, because I know that's always been a showstopper for us in Port Alberni. Yes, we'll come here, but no, you can't house us. So no, that's a very exciting thing. Just a couple of questions. The actual square footage of the total building when you're done, if you've got a rough estimate about how many square feet we're going to be looking at, and second of all, how big the actual footprint that you will need to put the building on. Thank you.
So that is something more that we'll know after we meet with the architectural team. They'll be able to look at the land and then well, they have all that knowledge, whereas I don't. So I could give you a number and it's probably not going to be accurate. But so they'll be meeting with us and they'll be able to actually survey the land. And then they're also meeting with us to hear our concept and then to be able to put it into more of a visual. They have everybody in their team that you need from start to finish. And they're very eager to help complete the project in the most, how do I say this? In the best way for the community. They want 100% First Nations inclusion. So when I did say that I'd reached out to Hepatchisset, we are very eager to hear from them because we would like to have the local nations involved as much as possible. Yeah, so maybe if I could get back to you on that one, I would, or if you could come with us, that would be excellent.
Yes.
Hey, Mary,
And
just based on your estimated costs, right? The budget at $300 a square foot. So you're looking at 60 to 65,000 square feet, right?
Mhm.
However high, if that helps.
Yes, and that would also included 2 levels of parking as well with that, plus the LEED certified, right? So it was kind of, everything was kind of all in there. And yes, Scott, yeah, when we were originally deciding, that was kind of what it was, but yeah, we'll know more when we do the feasibility study. And then a couple other comments, right, with Councillor Paulson. Thank you for your comments. And yes, the external markets are great. And I've done a lot of work in the Nisga'a Nation with the museum, and there are thousands of people that drive, and with the Nass Valley, of course, it's like an hour and a half drive from a hub. And people come specifically to look at that, that museum. So yes, absolutely agree with that. And then maybe if we can get your son's contact, because right, maybe he can come out and do a presentation for us, so we can kind of get some, some ideas there. And back to, and sorry, I was just wanting to acknowledge everybody's comments here. And yes, for the tourism stats, yes, 3 to 5 years. And we know that. And I think what we're trying to do too is look at, really robust business plan, and really kind of honing in and saying, okay, well, we might not have access to a lot of tourism stuff right now, but what can we do in the meantime? What are the different revenue streams we have? And I feel with conference centers and, with the conference center, that we'll be able to, generate the revenue with that. And yes, the operational costs, when we kind of did that initial preliminary thing, yeah, it's going to be very, very high. So yes, we agree. So thank you for those comments.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming today. So I think that next steps, it would be great if we could have someone working with your committee. I think that we can take that and have staff put something together for us, a recommendation on whether that would be a counselor or a staff member. But I think for connection, we would absolutely like to stay involved. And involved in hearing on Hepatchisset as well, and if this is a project that they're supportive of. But overall, we're really excited to see someone spearheading it. It's those of us who were on the last council together, the 3 of us had a lot of conversations about this and about the potential of having a cultural center in this community that we could really highlight the Nuu-chah-nulth history here. So it's exciting, and I think that the locations you have specified would play in really nicely to the other plans that we have there. So yeah, very happy to hear from you guys and look forward to connecting more.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, before we actually leave delegations, I understand there may have been a problem with the audio that was associated with the video. I'm just wondering, staff are positioned to replay it and felt it might be important to have that opportunity if council supports that.
Sure, I was thinking it needed some audio.
Yeah, so we are ready to kick that off. So we'll have our Sarah start that for us. Thank you.
was much better with sound. Thank you very much for letting us hear it again. Okay, so we will move on now to unfinished business. And we have item 1 from the Director of Corporate Services, AVICC resolution submissions. So staff has done some work in getting the 2 resolutions that council discussed passing prepared. We can read them out, but does council have any questions on the 2? Okay, seeing no questions, Councillor Corbeil, would you like to make the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that council endorse the resolutions as outlined for submission and consideration by the delegates at the 2021 AVICC Annual General Meeting and Convention taking place virtually May 28th, 2021. A, improved access to detox and treatment centers. Whereas there are extensive wait lists and limited access for individuals seeking entry to provincially funded residential detox and recovery treatment centers, and whereas individuals struggling with addiction are often required to complete medical detox prior to accessing, obtaining rehabilitation treatment, therefore be it resolved that AVICC petition the province to improve access to and reduced wait times for individuals seeking treatment for their addictions through medical detox and rehabilitation treatment centers. And if you'd like, I'll just continue. B, extending the life of fire apparatus. Whereas the Fire Underwriters Survey requires that in order to receive credit for fire insurance grading purposes, all first-line fire apparatus in small and rural communities should be replaced after 20 years of service and may only be extended up to 25 years when fire apparatus is tested and proven to be in excellent mechanical condition. And whereas small and rural local governments often are financially challenged to replace high cost and minimally used fire apparatus on a 20 to 25 year rotational basis, therefore be it resolved that the AVICC petition the province to advocate to the Insurance Bureau of Canada for the recognition and acceptance of an annual professional engineer's certification of mechanical condition of firefighting apparatuses to extend service life beyond 20 years.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Poon. Are there any questions or comments on either of the resolutions? Okay, seeing none, I just want to thank our staff for getting these together, and we will call the motion. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And the next item on our agenda is staff reports. Item number 1 is accounts. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the certification of the Director of Finance dated February 22, 2021 be received and checks numbering 148027 to 148093 inclusive, and payments of accounts totaling $435,547.80 be approved.
Second, Madam.
You moved and seconded. All in favor? Carried. And item number 2 from the development planner, development permit number 2004 for 3800 Bird Street.
Great.
Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For council's consideration today is a development permit at 3800 Bird Street, which is a lot that is currently being subdivided from the old Alberni Secondary School site and is located just east of the recently constructed Portview Landing Apartments. This is near the intersection of 16th and Bird Street. So District Development Corporation has applied for a permit in order to build a multifamily residential complex of 16 buildings and a total of 52 dwelling units. This will involve an extensive redevelopment of the property, and it would be the second development to take place on the site since it was rezoned in 2018. The property is approximately 4.5 acres and is currently zoned RM3, high density, multiple family residential. It's also within the multifamily development permit area in the OCP. In terms of the development itself, the applicant is proposing to build 10 fourplexes and 6 duplexes in a style that's typical for residential buildings, Construction will include high quality materials such as hardy board siding, vinyl windows, wooden fascia boards, wooden trim, and posts. And although the site is large, the amount of land for construction is actually fairly constrained by the topography. However, the applicants have still managed with their design to provide the required amount of open space within their development. And they've mostly provided this through a combination of small grassed areas, as well as private decks and patios for all of the units. The city's design guidelines really do encourage a significant amount of landscaping for this style of multifamily development. And the intent is to reduce the impact on the neighboring properties and to improve livability for residents. And the application does propose significant landscaping both within the site as well as on the outside of the site along the streets. So they're proposing to install streets along Bird Street and along 16th Avenue. Additional trees will also be installed to screen the buildings on the west and south property lines so that they can't be seen from the neighboring properties. And a public trail is also proposed along the east property line to allow pedestrian access through the site. So once the neighboring properties are developed, and this is really a series of developments within a large site, once the remaining properties are developed, the idea is that a trail will allow people to walk from Dry Creek all the way through the site out to Bird Street. With regards to the vehicle access, 2 separate lanes will be accessed from Bird Street with 1 additional lane off 16th Avenue. And each 4-plex building will have its own small parking lot within the site. The parking is distributed in parking clusters. The duplexes will all have private driveways, and I mention this because it means that all the required parking will be provided on site. So to summarize, issuing this permit will enable District Development Corporation to proceed with a multifamily residential development at 3800 Bird Street. This includes the construction of 16 buildings and a total of 52 dwelling units. The applicant has worked with staff to ensure the proposal meets all applicable development permit area guidelines in the official community plan, and the proposal also meets the requirements of the zoning bylaw. So council's options include proceeding with the issuance of the permit, not proceeding with the issuance of the permit and requesting further revisions from the applicant, or providing alternative direction to staff. The planning department does support issuance of this permit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from council? Councilor Kuhn, and then Solda and Corbeil.
Just wanted to say that I'm thrilled to see continued investment in our community and more housing options going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Solda.
I echo Councillor Kuhn, but I do have a couple of questions regarding the development. Will they have like a park of some sort, because it is for families? And some of these, like I live in a Spencer Park and we have a park. So I'm just kind of curious to know the same thing for that one.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This development application, there isn't really a large common area for residents. And, ideally, that is something we would like to see, is that common area. But the open space requirements in our zoning bylaw and within our design guidelines do allow some flexibility. And in this case, they've managed to provide a lot of open space in the form of private open space, of patios and balconies. And they've kind of added together a bunch of smaller grassed areas to meet that requirement. But you're right, that is ideally what we would like to see.
Well, definitely, because there is no park near there. And for open space with kids and that would be perfect. And the other question, do we know if this is going to be a strata, or is this a strata rental, or is it going to be people can buy the units?
I do believe it's meant to be a combination of strata rental and strata ownership, but I could be mistaken. It might be just strata rental, but there will be strata phasing involved.
Okay, thank you. But I still believe there should be a little open space for kids and stuff, parks. Thank you.
Thank you. There used to be a park near there, just a block away from there, that was recently taken out because of its condition. The space is still there, so it might be worth a conversation. At one point, when we were talking about rezoning this property, there was a comment made in the public hearing that the city was considering replacing the 16th Avenue Park. And with some of the park development from there. And I don't think that's a current plan, but Scott Smith has his hand up. So let's ask him about that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess I would just indicate that the 16th Avenue Park is still there. The playground equipment was removed, but the park is still there. And of course, the Dry Creek Trail is nearby, and a lot of our trail system is actually is quite close by to this property. And as Brian mentioned, there will be internal trail connection to that existing trail connection as well. So
the playground is
Madam
gone.
Mayor.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Solda.
Well, maybe it's something to talk about with partnership, and I don't know if the DCCs can kick in or anything with that, but to revitalize that park. It's just when you get little kids, they're not going to go down the trail by themselves and that. So I would still like to see something for the kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, just on the trail, Brian, I think you said to the east. I was under the impression the trail would be going sort of through the center of the project.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, originally the trail was proposed to go through the center of the property. There's a certain amount of topography they're unable to build upon, so that was going to be converted into a trail. But instead, the applicants and planning staff have settled on a route along the west side of the property. So it'll kind of split this development and the neighboring apartment buildings. It'll go kind of along that property line. And there'll also be trees there as well. And eventually, in future phases on the old school site, once that's all filled in, a trail is actually going to go all the way through to Dry Creek Park.
Okay, and I'm happy to see that the height of these buildings, I think the highest is 2 stories, and there was quite a concern from the neighbors or the whole neighborhood when this was first talked about, because the potential was for a 4-story building, which would have, hate to say it, ruined their view. Not that they own the view.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Okay. Would somebody like to read the motion that's written? Councillor Paulson.
I'd like to move the council authorize the issuance of development permit number 20-04, and that the Director of Corporate Services be authorized to sign the permit, including the plans prepared by MCM, PMG, and Applin Martin Limited, as shown in Schedule B of the attached permit and dated January 13th, 2021.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
Is there no way we can just have a little common area space? Or is it done deal?
I think it would be, we'd have to probably decline this and send it back if we were wanting them to change their entire layout to create a common space. Brian?
Madam Mayor.
Caitlin, is that you?
Yep. Sorry, I don't have a camera today, so I can't raise my hand. So I'm just going to jump in. I just want to provide Councillor Solda with a little bit of additional context. So this specific development that is being proposed on the northwest corner of the parcel is only one portion of the larger master plan community. And so within that broader master plan community, there at this point it is intended that there'll be a central green space. Of course, that's on a bit of a sloped area, so it's not going to be kind of the traditional park-like setting, but there will be trails, hopefully some kind of openings there. The design is to be determined at this point, but I just want to give some assurance that there will be an actual kind of park-like setting central to the entire development, not just this specific northwest corner, but the entire development.
Okay, I'll keep repeating that when the next phase comes along. Thank you.
Thank you. I do think it's important at some point for us to circle back to the park playground conversation as well, because when we went through the rezoning for this property, the 16th Avenue Park was discussed, and it was talked about that, it was aging and needed replacing, and that the development of this park could drive that. And then the park ended up being taken out because of the condition. So I don't think it's specific to this application. I think we should be cautious to, of bringing in things that are not relevant to the application in making our decisions, but it's a future conversation for sure. So with that, we have the motion moved and seconded. All in favor? None opposed? Carried. Thank you. Item number 3 from the development planner, we have development permit number 2009 for 5546 Swallow Drive.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the next permit before council today is for 5546 Swallow Drive, and the applicant, Clark Power, is proposing a multifamily residential development consisting of 2 buildings, each with 3 units for a total of 6 dwellings. The property was originally 2 individual lots on Swallow Drive, and these lots were rezoned in 2019 and consolidated into 1 parcel of approximately 0.4 acres. It's currently zoned RM2, medium density, multiple family residential, and it's also in the multifamily development permit area in the OCP. In terms of the development itself, the 2 buildings are oriented along the east and west property lines so that they mirror each other. The buildings will be 2 stories, and each unit will be approximately 1,250 square feet with 3 bedrooms each and private vehicle garages. The design of the buildings is typical of residential development and includes high quality materials such as vinyl siding, laminate roof shingle, and hardy shingle. And once again, the city's design guidelines do encourage landscaping in developments like this to reduce the impact on the neighboring properties and to improve livability for residents. To this effect, the side and rear yards will be enclosed by a cedar fence, and maple trees will be installed in the front yard along the roadway. There will also be lawn-covered common areas in the rear of the development to provide some open space for residents. The main vehicle access will be off Swallow Drive. However, units on the north end of the buildings will also have their own private driveways onto the street. And the other units on the inside of the development, the rear 4, will be accessed from a shared driveway. This means that all required parking will be provided on site, either through private driveways or private garages. So to sum this up, issuing this permit will enable the applicant to proceed with a 6-unit multifamily residential development on Swallow Drive. The applicant has worked with staff to ensure the proposal meets all applicable development permit area guidelines in the official community plan. And this proposal does also meet the requirements of the zoning bylaw, including the site development regulations of the RM2 zone. Council's options include proceeding with issuance of the permit, not proceeding with issuance of the permit and requesting further revisions from the applicant, or providing alternative direction to staff. The planning department supports the issuance of this permit as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions from council? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Poon, would you like to read the motion?
Unfortunately, I don't have the script in front of me.
Okay, Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that council authorize the issuance of development permit number 20-09 and that the Director of Corporate Services be authorized to sign the permit, including the development plans as shown as Schedule B. Permit prepared by Mountain Design and Drafting issued for 5546 Swallow Drive and dated January 19th, 2021.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Solda. Any final comments on this? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And moving on to item number 4 from the Manager of Planning, our Housing Needs Report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. Just want to confirm here if we have, yep, looks like we've got Rebecca there as well, and we've got the slides here. Okay, perfect. So thank you for that. So the city has prepared its first housing needs report in accordance with guiding legislation. And today we are joined by Rebecca Taylor, the project consultant, to present some of the key findings from the study. I'll go over that kind of, we'll go over that in kind of a high level, but a detailed breakdown of the various statistics and key findings can also be found within the attached report if you want to get into the weeds a little bit more. All right, Rebecca, do you want to just say hi really quickly?
Hi, everyone.
So that's Rebecca there. Would you mind going to the next slide, Twyla? Thank you. So today we're just going to go over, provide a little bit of a background, go over some of the key findings, talk about some kind of high level recommendations and next steps, and then we'll go through maybe a bit more detailed questions. But I would also kind of encourage Mayor and Council, if you have any questions about specific slides as they come up, just feel free to kind of jump in. That might be the easiest way, so we're not jumping back and forth between slides at the very end. Okay, next slide, please, Twyla. Oh, it's Sarah. Sorry, Sarah. Okay, so in terms of housing needs report, so legislation took place back in April of 2019 from the provincial level that requires local governments to kind of describe current and anticipated housing needs in their respective communities as a housing needs report. So these reports really kind of intend to look at some of the specific housing data to describe that current housing situation in the community, so that the city can better understand some of the current situations and some of the projected housing needs in order to start identifying existing and projected gaps in the supply within the community. So that's really kind of at a high level what the housing needs report is. It's really quite analytical and data driven. It's meant to kind of use a variety of different housing data sources to get some statistical information and that's current and recent, but as well do projections moving forward. Next slide, please.
Okay, so I'm going to take over from here for a bit. So this is the process that we went through to develop the housing needs report. The first thing that we did was data collection. So as Caitlin mentioned, this includes census data. It also includes assessment data and housing data. We did an online public survey in a collaboration between the city and the ACRD. And the ACRD was also involved in the stakeholder survey and focus group meeting. And the ACRD was involved because they're working on their housing needs assessments for the 4 electoral areas surrounding Port Alberni. So it was a good way to get, everybody involved because there's a lot of overlap for a lot of the stakeholders between the city and the surrounding electoral areas. And so once that was all completed, then there was analysis of the data, both the statistical data and the stakeholder and public engagement data, and then the report was written. Next slide, please. So these are some of the data sources, Statistics Canada, CMHC. The AIR DNA source was for short-term rentals, and that was a report that was presented, I believe, to Council in 2019. So next slide, please. So just start off with the population of Port Alberni. As you can see, it hasn't grown very much since 2006. There was an actual slight decrease in population between 2011 and 2016. And Statistics Canada also provides projection data that is at the regional district level, and using that data, we were able to extrapolate to a projection of 19,436 people in Port Alberni in 2025, and that's a growth rate of 0.3% each year. So it's pretty small. It could be completely different because you never know how things are going to change, but that's based on Statistics Canada data. And then the orange line shows the number of households. So that approximately relates to the number of dwelling units within the city. And again, the projected number of households for 2025 is 9,130. Next slide, please. So a little bit more information about households. In 2016, which was the last census, the 68% were owner households and 32% were renter households. And that gap has actually closed slightly over the last between 2006 and 2016. So there's an increase in renter households compared to owner households. And then another important piece of information, 35% of households in Port Alberni in 2016 were one-person households. This has led to a decrease in the average household size to 2.1, which is pretty small. And then, as you can see, just another useful piece of information is that 12.5% are single parent households, and that can have an impact on affordability. Next slide, please. So this shows the age distribution from 2016 and then the projected age distribution for 2025. And as you can see, the biggest population growth is likely to be in the over 65 age groups. And comparatively, that will lead to a decrease in the working age groups of 15 and above. So next slide, please. So this is some information about the median income in 2016. The total was 50,595. And then but this chart shows that homeowners are more likely to be grouped in the higher income groups, and renters are generally grouped in the lower income groups, especially in the income groups that are below the poverty line. And next slide, please. So this shows how the median income has changed over time. So this actually goes back to the 2001 census, because when I pulled out the data, there was a big dip between 2006 and 2011. And so I wanted to see how that had changed over a little bit more time. And the ACRD is the blue line for comparison. So they're pretty close, but the city is slightly lower, which is to be expected because of the number of retail jobs and stuff within the city. Next slide, please. So now we're going to move to housing stock. And this shows the different types of houses that we have, or dwelling units we have within Port Alberni. 69% are single detached houses, which is quite high compared to BC as a whole. It is more of a spread out, lower density community. And I think Caitlin had some comments to make on this as well.
Yeah, I think it's just it's a really telling slide in a lot of ways, in terms of just it really illuminates kind of where the majority of our housing stock is right now, being single detached houses. And while in some ways that might be not always great to have it kind of tipped in that direction, I think that creates a lot of opportunity for change and for strategic growth, and some gentle to moderate densification, in order to help kind of address that missing middle phenomenon, where we're really missing a lot of some of the diversity of housing stock, even that we just saw in the last 2 development applications. So just something to highlight there.
Thanks, Caitlin. So next slide, please. So this is probably not all that surprising based on the number of single family dwellings we have, but the majority of homes, dwelling units in Port Alberni have 3 or more bedrooms, which, when you think back to how many people are living alone, it does mean that there is somewhat of a disconnect between the types of housing available and the number of people living alone, or 1 or 2 people living. They're often living in a house that's maybe bigger than they need to be living in. Next slide, please. So this, I found this one really interesting. 43.5% of homes in Port Alberni were built before 1960, and this is very high. I think I can't remember off the top of my head the average for BC, but it is, even compared to the ACRD, it is quite substantially higher. And then, so we have data up to 2016, but we also pulled building permit data that showed that between 2017 and 2020, 143 new single family dwellings were built and 235 multifamily units were built. So there has been more construction, increase in construction. I believe there's a slide later on that will show that. But it is interesting to see how many older homes that could lead to another area of inaffordability if people can't afford to do major repairs to older homes. Next slide, please. So this is the building permit data. So this shows the number of new residential units created between 2010 and 2020. It also shows the number of residential units demolished, and then the comparison, so the increase in residential units over time. So between 2010 and 2020, 700 new residential dwelling units were added to the housing stock in Port Alberni. Next slide, please. So now we're going to move on to some more of the financial data. So this is the average purchase price from 2006 to 2020, and this is from BC Assessment. And as you can see, sort of from 2015 onwards, housing prices have increased quite dramatically. I believe it's about 53%, but they've increased in those 4 or 5 years. So again, this is something to look at when considering affordability. Next slide, please. And then this one's showing the average rent for primary rental units. So primary rental units are purpose-built rental units. This would be apartment buildings and like duplexes, something that's specifically been built as a rental unit, compared to secondary suites, full houses that are being rented out, condo units that are being rented out, and those are considered to be secondary rental units. And as you can see, somewhat mirroring the purchase data, there's been a steady increase over time, and then quite a dramatic increase for the units that are 3 or more bedrooms. And this is probably because there's quite a shortage of units with 3 or more bedrooms. And something we don't have income data right to 2020 because that's part of the census data, but between 2006 and 2016, the average rent increased by 37%, but the median income for renters fell by 0.9%. So you can see that affordability, the gap there is widening. Next slide, please. So this is actually talking specifically about affordability gap. And basically this shows the income groups, the percentage of the population, and then what they could afford based on a limit of 30% spent on shelter costs to either rent or purchase. And then the average rent, which that data is from both from 2020 for the average rent and the average purchase price. And then the fields that are highlighted in sort of the pale red color, that those are considered to be income groups that cannot afford the average rent or average purchase price. And then the green is areas where they could afford the current rent or purchase. And one thing to note about average rent is that it is the average rent for all primary rental units, not the current rent for someone moving into a new unit. So this would take into account someone who's lived in the same apartment for 10 to 20 years and is benefiting from the rent control. So they would have a lot lower rent than somebody who's moving into a unit for the first time. And next. Oh, sorry, Caitlin, go ahead.
Just one thing I think to add about that other slide as well is just, I think it's a really interesting, it's quite data driven, but I think what it kind of illuminates too is that notion of kind of the gap between people with lower incomes versus people with higher incomes. What you can see is that people with higher incomes really aren't struggling as much in terms of they're essentially able to afford with surplus the average rents or the average purchase prices, whereas the little to no income folks in our community are really struggling to even get the average rent or the average purchase price by quite a dramatic amount. So I think that's, from a numbers perspective, it certainly speaks volumes.
Thanks, Caitlin. So this is a little bit more information about primary rental market. In 2016, we had 1,101 primary rental units. And so actually there's more secondary rental units in Port Alberni than there are primary. And unfortunately, we don't have very much information about secondary rental units because they are they're not subject to the same data collection as primary rental units. So CMHC, Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, collects data on primary rental units, but not on secondary rental units. And as I mentioned at the beginning, there was a study done about short-term rentals for the city, and there were approximately 91 short-term rentals found at that time, and that included about 35 complete houses that would be rented out on a short-term basis. And some good news, in October 2020, the rental vacancy rate reached 3%, which is considered to be the low end of a healthy vacancy rate. And this has been an increase from 0.7% in 2018. So the new developments that have been happening, for example, up on Bird Street, have helped somewhat with the rental vacancy rate. A low rental vacancy rate can lead to pressure in the market, and then that would increase rental costs. And so that's why it's important to have at least some rentals available at any one time. Next slide, please. So this shows how the rental vacancy rate has changed over time, from quite a very high point back in 2000 of 20%, slowly falling and then reaching that low of 0.7% in 2018, and then that increased in 2020. Next slide, please. So housing indicators were created by StatsCan and CMHC to provide ways for municipalities to analyze the health of their housing in their communities. These indicators include affordability, where shelter costs are 30% or less, and that includes utilities, and it's 30% of their before tax income for the household. Suitability is where the dwelling has enough bedrooms to meet national occupancy standard requirements. And that a breakdown on that, I think, is provided in the housing needs report. And then adequacy is that the dwelling does not need any major repairs as reported by the residents. So as you can see, this shows the breakdown for owner households and renter households between 2006 and 2016. And the good news is for owner households is that those housing indicators have been improving over time, which is great. And for renter households, it has improved over 2011 for suitability and adequacy, but unfortunately affordability has continued to decrease. Basically, rental units are becoming more unaffordable. Next slide, please. So core housing need is a household that is that meets one of those or does not meet one of those housing indicators, so unsuitable, inadequate, or unaffordable, and whose income levels are such that they could not afford to find alternative, suitable, and adequate housing in their community. So it's basically they're trapped in a building that's either unaffordable, unsuitable, or inadequate because there's nothing in there that's affordable to them in the community. And as you can see for renters, that's 41.4% of renters in 2016 were in core housing need, which is quite high, and it has increased over time, which is not a great sign. Next slide, please. Extreme core housing need is a household that is in core housing need, but they're spending 50% or more of their income on before tax on shelter costs. And as you can see, this has also increased over time, and 2016 was at 18.4%. Next slide, please. So just a quick breakdown of housing for vulnerable populations in Port Alberni. You can see that we have housing for the homeless, for women's shelter, and then low-income families, low-income seniors. And then there's also the BC Housing also provides sorry, can't think of the word, subsidies to people living in primary rental units. So they're not in designated subsidized housing development, but they are receiving assistance. And then just another note here that in 2018, a homeless count was done and in the spring, and they found 147 people without homes. So that gives you an idea based on the number of homeless shelter beds that there is a gap there as well. Next slide, please. And so Caitlin's going to talk a little bit about the public survey that we did and the results that we discovered from that survey.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, so a lot of the data that we've talked about now is kind of collected from other sources, a lot of statistical information, but supplementary to that data analysis, the city has undertaken a public survey to get input from the broader community just about their current lived experience, basically, in Port Alberni. So essentially what we did is we provided a comprehensive online survey, which was made available from October 27th to October 29th of last year. We also did make some paper copies available around the community, and if folks reached out to us, we made them available through City Hall as well. The survey was hosted on the city's Let's Connect PA website and was also promoted through social media and other online platforms. And we did have a quite a healthy response. We had 668 responses. Of course, this is from both the city and the surrounding Alberni Valley, as we did partner with the ACRD on the survey to make sure that we were kind of not exhausting folks and getting as much information from the broader community as possible. And what we saw here is kind of, oh, sorry, next slide, please. What we saw here is kind of to a larger degree that the information collected through the online survey really closely reflects some of the data collected for the housing needs report. So we did have a really wide range of people, whether that's kind of with a mix of incomes or ages or employment status. We really had a wide range there, which is quite reflective of the community overall. We saw that a majority of the respondents were homeowners living in single family homes, which is reflective of what we've kind of talked about earlier, which is kind of reflective of that makeup of the community. We did see that the majority of respondents did seem to live in 3 or 4 bedroom homes, again, which is reflective of what we talked about earlier. So not a big surprise there. And then similarly, to the broader community, again, we saw that looking at this pie chart here, the majority of respondents were living alone or with a spouse. So not, there's certainly families, people living in families responding to the survey too, but this is again broad, reflective of the broader trends within the community. Next slide, please. So in terms of preferences, one of the things we want to kind of get into the survey was getting a sense of what people actually desired and what they wanted. And it was interesting to see that for a large part, 83% of respondents wanted to live in single detached dwellings, as well as 86% would prefer to be homeowners. So overall, that the preference to a large degree in the community based on the survey respondents was that notion of home ownership and living in a single detached dwelling, which may or may not be the most affordable option based on the current trends. 11% said that they had rented their home as a short-term rental, which we thought was kind of interesting and kind of maybe spoke to kind of a growing desire to have that option and flexibility within their own privately owned households. And then one other thing that we want to kind of get a sense with the survey was whether folks felt that they could age in place. So specifically because the number of people in the community aging is certainly growing. We want to get a sense of whether a lot of people felt comfortable aging in their current household, and a lot of folks actually did say yes. So I think that's good in a lot of ways, and so that's a positive thing. Next slide, please. We also got into some details around the housing challenges and to get a better bit of a better sense of what people were struggling with. So, you know, we saw a lot of people indicating that they were struggling with housing costs, whether that was the actual cost of house themselves, the house itself, or the cost of utilities or things like that. So we see like a really large majority here spending quite a bit on their housing expenses. Interestingly, about 16% said that their houses needed major repairs or replacements. Again, that's similar to the 20% that we found based on the statistical data. A large degree said that the housing that they could afford was of poor quality, kind of indicating that, you know, even if they were able to get into something, they might not be able to actually update it or live comfortably in the sense of, you know, it's got a poor roof or something like that. And then one other thing that was, I think, really important and interesting to point out is that 10% of our survey respondents felt that they had been discriminated against or refused housing, either based on you know, race, gender, income level, to some degree, that they felt that they were being refused housing based on who they were. And that's a pretty high number. Next slide, please. We also asked folks how their current housing situation could be improved. And so the top three ones here, not surprising, a lot of people saying lower cost of mortgage in the orange there, or basic home improvements or renovations in the green there. But what was kind of really exciting to see, and you know, maybe is in line with what Councillor Paulson was saying earlier about, you know, the trends in this community towards more energy efficiency, but we had a really large amount of people saying in the other orange that they want to see their houses improved with energy efficiency or to be more environmentally friendly. So that was certainly exciting in a lot of ways. Next slide, please. We also asked a couple more open-ended questions, which we then took all the data and all the feedback, kind of summarized it and analyzed it into themes. So when we asked about what are the most serious housing issues in Port Alberni that need to be addressed, these are kind of the broadest themes that came across there. Anything in a larger size font probably came up more often. So you see things like expensive, rental, attainable, and available being the biggest words, being that those really came up most often in those open-ended questions. Similarly, homelessness was often brought up a lot and talked about by a lot of respondents. A lot of people really concerned about helping people who are suffering without homes and might be really living in very inadequate transient housing situations. Next slide, please. And then we also asked folks, again, oops, one back there, Sarah, please. Thank you. We also asked folks what they felt was most needed. So again, kind of the opposite of that last question. So a lot of folks saying that they want to see more subsidized housing, low barrier housing, and just affordable housing in general as a broad term, but some other specific solutions being things like rent caps or, you know, innovative ideas around maybe, you know, tiny homes, other low barrier homes, shelter beds. Pet friendliness did come up quite a bit in the survey as well. We saw definitely a lot of comments about people struggling to find pet-friendly accommodations or accommodations that were suitable for their pets as members of their family. So that was also something that came up as being needed and is certainly common within many communities. Next slide. And then these are just some of the comments that we pulled out that we thought were kind of interesting in terms of solutions that people were posed. You can find these within the report itself, so I won't read them today, but certainly lots of different ideas coming out. One of them, the one that I thought was quite interesting, was around this central bulletin board, a place for people to share rentals in a comprehensive way, so that they can kind of, similar to the Facebook group that exists out there, but something maybe a little bit different. I thought that was kind of a unique solution. Next slide, please. And I'll hand it back to Rebecca for the stakeholder survey. Just muted there, Rebecca.
Thanks, Caitlin. So the stakeholder survey was sent out to 40 different organizations across the Alberni Valley, and these organizations were identified in collaboration with the city and the ACRD. And we had 13 responses, and the biggest concern that they noted was access to safe and affordable housing. And then we also asked them about barriers to improving housing in the Alberni Valley, and they mentioned stigmas around mental health and addiction, as well as unemployment, and then the increasing cost to build new homes with respect to lumber and other materials required, as well as probably labor. And then the suggested strategies for improvement included cooperative housing, more advocacy at the provincial level, developing a housing strategy, as well as more on-site supports for vulnerable populations, and the ever popular reduce red tape. Next slide, please. So then part of the requirements from the provincial government was looking at future needs. So based on the population projection, the household projections, it's anticipated that at least 194 new dwelling units will be required by 2025, which based on the number of new units being built each year is pretty attainable. But something else to consider is that in 2016, based on the number of people in core housing need and facing unaffordability, more than 1,000 subsidized or affordable dwelling units were required to accommodate those households. The good news is that there are currently 9 different affordable housing projects in the planning stages in Port Alberni. So that is really great. It'd be about 380 units in total. And that includes some directed specifically at seniors, which is definitely an important area. And then, as we mentioned before, more seniors housing and accessible dwellings will be required to provide for the aging population. Next slide, please. So Caitlin's going to talk about next steps now.
Thanks, Rebecca. So while the housing needs report, it's not a bylaw and it's not necessarily legally binding on the city in terms of the specific outcomes or recommendations, it is a helpful tool that the city can use to inform other day-to-day projects or broader policy initiatives. So for example, the housing needs report will inform the next review of the city's official community plan, as well as other ongoing housing policy projects that the city is endeavoring in. It will also be helpful to reference this report when considering various development applications, whether that's a new subdivision, rezoning, or various affordable housing projects. And then in terms of the next housing needs report, that will be completed in 2026, so in another 5 years' time, again, as per the provincial legislation. But in the meantime, the city should also continue to monitor the housing supply and these related indicators, probably on a more regular basis. Next slide, please. So thank you. We hope that you have found the housing needs report to provide some important information. And through this project, we have certainly observed that Port Alberni continues to experience a unique set of housing challenges specifically to this community. As you see, many people are struggling to afford housing with rising rent and purchase prices, low vacancy rates, and lower medium household incomes. The city is also mostly made up of larger, older single-family homes, leaving many people without kind of affordable, smaller, and easily maintainable alternatives. So really diversifying the housing supply with more gentle and moderate forms of infill development will help address housing suitability and affordability in the long term. The city of Port Alberni does continue to support and enable a large number of market and non-market development projects to help meet the long-term needs of this community, though some necessary housing interventions are certainly more nuanced than that and will require support from senior levels of government. But for now, the adoption of the housing needs report will mark the conclusion of the project for this time period and fulfill that provincial mandate. The report will be made available on the city's website and the city's Let's Connect PA project page. And then we are also required to submit this final report to UBCM in order to receive the final funding for the project as they were the project funder. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start with Councillor Poon.
Thank you. Thanks for the report. I think that was very informative. And although, you know, certain parts of it were no surprise, I think that we should be all very happy that we have, you know, more housing options on the way. And I hope that we can facilitate even more multifamily housing to address those needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have Councillor Corbeil and Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple things. One, do you not think that this is somewhat relative, that you know, the average family income in Port Alberni is lower than the average across the province, and therefore it does make it less affordable. And I think, you know, we need to concentrate more on family supporting jobs that could actually supply a good, clean and affordable housing. And secondly, a question that I have, with the homeless population, you came up with 50% of the individuals have lived in the community for at least 10 years. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Like, how was that? Was that just how the question was asked? How long have you lived in Port Alberni? Because there's quite a concern that, you know, where are these homeless people coming from? And I know the RCMP have always told us that most of them are local people, and I just wonder what your takes on that is.
Absolutely. Maybe I can field that one, Rebecca, if you're all right with that. Okay, sounds good. Yes, thank you for the questions. In terms of the housing report and the data on the homeless population in Port Alberni, that information we gathered through the previous study that was conducted in 2018. So we referenced BC Housing's report on homelessness in Port Alberni from 2018. So they collect all that data and kind of do a survey assessment using, I think, a fairly standard questionnaire. So we don't have the specific details on how they got that specific question answered and how they might have framed it, but that was the outcome of their report done in 2018. There was supposed to be another homeless count completed in 2020, as I'm sure you know, but unfortunately with COVID, it was temporarily delayed. But I think that's certainly a good observation in terms of a common question asked about who's in the community and where they're coming from. And then to your other point about income, absolutely. I think income is certainly a big part of the equation when it comes to affordability and who can afford what types of housing. So yeah, absolutely. As we saw within the report, there were certainly some dips in the medium income in Port Alberni over the most recent years. And it seems like we were a bit maybe slower to recover from that downturn in 2008. Things are certainly looking up in terms of medium income, but we are still quite a bit below the provincial average.
I believe there's going to be a homeless count in April, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, there is. Great. Councillor Haggard and then Councillor Solda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, I'd like to thank Rebecca, the manager of planning, for completing this report. I thought it was a really good read, and it was just chock full of information that we can use moving forward. I gleaned some really good points, and I think those are things that council is going to have to start looking at. I was wondering if it was possible, or maybe I could suggest that the council do a strategic planning session just focusing on housing. We could start outlining some key strategies moving forward and then start laying a good foundation for future housing needs for the community. Any thoughts or? That's it. I was just asking the question.
Okay. I think that there's a lot of next steps that could come out of this for sure. And yeah, I'd be curious to hear more on what Caitlin envisions as next steps. I know some of that was covered, but yeah, I mean, this is a huge amount of information, and of course we can just take it take it and, use it as we move forward. But I think doing some more planning could be really valuable because there's some clear gaps for sure. Scott.
I think as Caitlin mentioned, certainly this will play a central role in the future OCP work, and that's a very, broad policy document that looks at a variety of things, but housing is a big part of that. And then for council, if as part of some strategic planning, if council wants to, maybe consider housing as another thing that you want to consider, that certainly would be something that could be looked at or discussed. But I think the OCP will really help guide that discussion as part of that for council and the community as far as the next step that we'll be looking to do in the near future.
Great, thank you. Councillor Solda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I sure hope it plays with the developers too, to realize such a shortage and low cost housing. I get a lot of people that come in and they're seniors, and I've said this before, seniors are trying to sell their big 4 or 5 bedroom house, but they can't get into a smaller house that's a rancher style, and they want to move. So they stay in their larger house, and it's really frustrating for them, and they do want to sell. I know families that live in hotel rooms right now because they can't afford apartments and stuff like that. The apartments prices are going outrageous right now, and it'd be really interesting to see what happens with this report if you upgraded it in the 6 months, into 2021 now, because I think it's changed a little bit. And I thought it was a great report, and I'm really glad to have got it, but there's still a long ways to go in this community. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, I think the report just really highlights all of the work that there is to do around housing. But despite, the number of issues that it highlights in terms of affordability, I think that the development that we're seeing in our community right now in both, market-based housing, multifamily and single-family residential, as well as affordable housing, a significant amount of affordable housing projects coming from BC Housing, shows that we're on our starting to address that. So I actually read today, Port Alberni there was another list put out that didn't necessarily agree with all of it, but one of the measures for province-wide ranking of communities that came out was number of housing starts per 10,000 population, and Port Alberni was in the top 10 in the province for a number of housing starts last year.
It
made
the top 10 for a change.
That's right. Well, we're in the top 10 in that. So that's significant for a community like Port Alberni that hasn't traditionally had an incredible amount of development. We are really picking up, and obviously our planning department is feeling that, the development community is feeling that, everybody is feeling that. We have a long way to go, but I thought that statistic was really interesting for Port Alberni to be included in the top 10 in the province. Mm-hmm. Are there any other questions or comments on this? Okay, I want to just really thank you for your all the work that you've put into this. It was a very informative report, and I think it's something we'll be reflecting back on very regularly.
Mayor Minions, I just want to add one. I know it's hard when I'm not on the screen here. I'm like waving my arms. No, I'm just kidding. I think if I could just add one piece of information here, it would be that absolutely the OCP is a critical piece of long range planning policy that will help guide the community in coming years. But there's certainly, I think interim interventions, whether that's, looking into specific housing issues that council is interested in or that the community is interested in, doing specific, regulatory approaches to new development. There's a whole variety of options that I think are maybe more interim that could by all means be explored by the city, but probably not to be jumped into the weeds today.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Solda, would you like to move adoption? Oh, Councillor Solda, you're muted.
It was probably a good thing. No, I'm just kidding. Madam Mayor, I move that the council adopt the housing needs report dated February 2021 as attached for the submissions to the Union of BC Municipalities.
Second.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Poon. Seeing no further comments, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Okay, we will move on to item number 5 under staff reports from the Director of Finance, 2021 General Municipal Tax Rate Adjustment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So in 2020-2024 financial plan, there was an increase in 2020 of a 1.9% year over year from 2019. The tax rates that are set within the financial, within the tax rate bylaw should reflect the amounts that are anticipated in the annual financial plan. In 2020, those rates were not aligned with the financial plan, and the taxation value for the Vancouver Island Regional Library was in the financial plan for general municipal, and also within the separate line item for the library tax. So with that, the general municipal rate was including the Vancouver Island Regional Library taxation, and this created an increase in revenues beyond what was in the financial plan of the 1.9%. With that, staff consulted with the province staff, with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, and sought the recommendation to proceed with the best approach to correct this. What we see today in front of council is the recommended approach from staff and reviewed with the ministry as far as the amount over collected in 2020. So council could consider that recommendation, or council could consider a inclusion of the $790,000 as an additional expenditure in 2021. But the recommendation that's provided today provides the alignment with the 2020 increase for 1.9%, and in our draft 21 plan, a 3.95% tax increase year over year. So with that, the recommendations in council for consideration.
Thank you. Questions from council? Councillor Corbeil.
Well, I got to say, I don't grasp that very well. So Andrew, you're telling us, I think what you're telling us is we taxed last year by more than $790,000 more than we should have. And then this year, we've got a choice of putting the money aside in a reserve or putting it towards this year's budget, but there's no change in the 3.95% increase in taxes. Where am I going sideways here?
Mm-hmm.
Madam Mayor, sorry for not being clear on that. So what happened was the Vancouver Island Regional Library tax was overtaxed, both in it was included in the general tax and it was included separately. So that amount was increased. So that 1.9% wasn't the actual amount that was received in 2020, but that was within the tax bylaw. So our financial plan reflected a 1.9% increase, and our current plan reflects a 3.95% increase. So to take that over revenue that was received in 2020 and adjust the tax rate to reflect a lower rate this year is the recommendation. So taking that amount that was over and then reducing the tax rate in 2021.
So the tax rate in 2021 will not be 3.95. It will be reduced by the $790,000.
Correct.
Okay, well, that was my question.
Thank you. Were there other questions? Okay, Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read the recommended motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to move that council authorize staff to reduce general municipal taxation in the amount of $790,419 by setting the 2021 tax rates bylaw to reflect this reduction in order to correct the city's collection of excess revenues in the 2020 calendar year.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Solda. Any further comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Andrew. And moving on to item number 6 from the Economic Development Manager, we have the Industrial Land Inventory and Action Plan. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Council. Every year, the city and the regional district receive a number of inquiries from entrepreneurs who are looking for industrial land or light industrial land for a number of projects. In 2018, we were absolutely slammed with requests for a variety of projects, many of them forestry oriented, but some of which were Bitcoin operations, industrial diamond manufacturing, cannabis cultivation, food production, all of those very good things. And every year we struggle to find land for those projects, despite our reputation as an industrial community. So when it was partway through 2018 that Mike Erg at the regional district and I decided to get deeper into the issue. We requested some funding from the Island Coastal Economic Trust to conduct an industrial land inventory and action plan. We issued a request for proposal and selected MDB Insight to do the work. The project became not so much a complete inventory of industrial lands as it was a focus on the go-to lands that we always turn to when we get an inquiry, and those being the Link Mill site and the Alberni Valley Regional Airport area. We also discovered at the beginning of the project that there's a large chunk of land on the eastern boundary of the city that we thought was owned by the province, that's actually owned by the municipality. So we asked MDB to take a look at that as well. They are going to talk about the approach that they took to the project and their findings. We've brought this to council, although it says final report on it. We are inviting council to recommend any other action items or strategies that you may see or think necessary to address this. And finally, just before I hand it over to Paul Blaze and Jordan Tidy at MDB, I would like to say thank you to them for their absolute patience and persistence in delivering the project. They began work in the spring of 2019, and they had completed the project during the earlier phases of the pandemic. They agreed to hold off on a presentation to council, hoping that they would be able to do it in person. When it began to be apparent that that wasn't going to happen, they prepared a draft report for council's consideration in November of 2020. And then when we weren't able to pull that together, they agreed to update it for this presentation. So a profuse amount of thanks from myself to MDB for their, as they say, their patience and persistence. So with that, I'd like to ask Paul and Jordan to talk about the plan.
Thanks, Pat. Kind as always. Appreciate the introduction. Mayor Minions, members of council, it's a pleasure to be with you tonight. I'm Paul Blay, Executive Vice President, co-founder of MDB Insight, which is a firm that focuses on economic development consulting. Jordan Toddy is a senior consultant with us who was very involved in the project. So I'm going to do a little introduction, then hand it over to Jordan for a brief description of the project. Then we'll be happy to take any questions that members of council might have. So I think ultimately this document will provide you with some intelligence on how to approach the industrial land questions that Pat has referred to in his introduction and in his staff report. You've been getting lots of inquiries, and what to do with them. It becomes a vast amount of time and effort to respond to some of these inquiries. And if you continue to spin your or chase your tail, I suppose, in trying to satisfy industrial inquiries that don't ultimately have a place in the community, then it becomes an endless game, I guess, of receiving interest and not being able to necessarily satisfy that. So the report provides you with some good intelligence on target market potential and also industrial land potential. So Jordan, if I could hand it over to you, you can give a little bit of an overview of the project for council.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paul. I was just going to see if I could share my screen so I can just throw a few slides up for everyone just to make it a little easier for everyone to see what we're working on here. Is everyone able to see that?
Yep.
Perfect. So I'll just give you a bit of a project overview. So essentially through project, we went through 3 phases. We started off with our project initiation and project charter. Phase 2 was all about market research and the lands inventory. So with Pat, we developed a set of evaluation criteria. We went through a full economic base analysis. And as Pat alluded to, we've actually updated that analysis for more recent data available from this year for this version of the report versus the previous versions. We completed a sector analysis as well, sort of identify some of the the sectors and value propositions behind what we think might make sense for different industrial land should they come to market. We did a number of interviews with businesses and landowners to help develop sort of a long list of industrial sites. And then as Pat alluded to, we went to a short list of industrial sites to do a deeper investigation on. So from that process, we went down to our Class D site assessment. So we worked with a subconsultant, Coors and Associates, an engineering firm, which completed a full set of Class D assessments on the 3 sites. So they identified for us the overall cost to get these sites serviced. And definitely it was a very useful thing for us to sort of understand what it would take to get these sites online. Then we developed our draft community profile and action plan. And then we've got the draft and presentation that we're doing right now. So the main piece that sort of came out of everything was the shortlisted sites, which I've got a bit of a chart right here to go through. So essentially, as Pat had mentioned, we've got the Link Mill site, the airport land site, and then the site on 19th and Montrose within the city itself. So the sites, if we start with the Link Mill site, it's about 19 hectares. It's got private road access. In terms of servicing issues, we've got a lack of water on the site, and it's owned by Mosaic. Its current zoning is industrial use. There's possible contamination on site. We weren't able to determine that fully, and it would take a deeper investigation on the site itself. In terms of the Coors assessment, it would cost about just under $6.5 million for sanitary and storm sewer servicing, and we identified agribusiness as a potential sector. When it came to the airport lands, 26 hectares. So these are lands specifically off Airport Road with access to Highway 4. There is again the same issue with lack of water at the site, also owned by Mosaic. Its current zoning is the Forest Reserve District. We are not aware of any contamination. In terms of getting sanitary and storm sewer installed, there would be about $12.6 million, water serving at about $24.8 million. We identified transportation, warehousing, and manufacturing as the sectors that would make sense for that site. On the last site, there are 3 lots on the 19th of Montrose for about 29.3 hectares. It does have access to the highway, although there is the lack of water on the site. Good news with this particular site is that it actually is owned by the city. In terms of the current zoning, it's set up for future development. We're unable of any contamination issues. We identified that it would be about $6 million for sanitary and storm service to be installed, and 5.6 for water servicing. And the sector we identified was manufacturing. From this, we went and developed our action plan, which was underpinned by 3 pillars. And the action plan itself is in more detail within the report itself. So we've got the development of investment-ready land, so focusing on the sites and what it would take to get those sites activated. Sector-specific investment support. So based on the research we did based on the specific sectors we identified, what are the specific actions that could be done to support the development of sites, development of those sectors, and 3, marketing and promotion of lands once they become investment ready. And that sort of underpins the entire action plan itself. And that's the end of my little slides.
Thanks, Jordan. Be happy to entertain any questions that members of council might have.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Paulson, and then Councillor Corbeil.
I guess I acknowledge the Linknall site and the airport site, and I think the airport is going to offer a fair amount of optimism over the next few years. The Montrose and 19th, I kind of drove up there the other day, and it's all treed areas, and it's very, very close to a couple of residential areas. And I don't quite understand the highway access. The only highway access you'd have from there would be if you built a road to the highway, as far as I could see, but maybe it's closer to the highway than I think it is. I just have a feeling that that particular area would be in our future, probably future residential. But just curious about your thoughts.
And to your point, there's definitely those are a number of the issues in terms of getting that site developed for industrial land. It was simply just one of the sites that were available and that were identified through the short list that we would get the estimates done on. So just so we would have the information, but to your point, there definitely are some constraints on those lands.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil.
Well, I too was quite surprised to see 19th and Montrose. And then when I heard there was highway access, I was really confused. But I'm curious, why do we not hear about Ship Creek and Block 105 area, or up in the Sherwood area behind Sherwood's auto wrecker along the Sherwood Road there? Those seem like natural industrial sites to me.
I can speak to the latter one, Jordan, and you may speak to the other two. But I did a site visit on the last one, the auto wrecker property, and it's the area behind it is small. It's in an environmentally sensitive area near the river, and so poses some challenges. The privately owned, or the section of the auto wrecker property that's currently an auto wrecker as well, would pose some of those same challenges around environmental considerations, and would be a very small footprint for the amount of investment. So the per acre cost of servicing and such would be considerable. Yeah. Jordan, do you have any other thoughts on
If
the
I
other?
may,
Pat may want to speak to that. Thanks, Pat. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to jump in. So the Sherwood site and Block 105 are two of our other go-to areas. Anytime an inquiry comes up, we will make a call or we'll go and visit the owners of those sites and talk to them. And so repeatedly, with respect to Sherwood's, they've indicated their desire to see the auto record portion of the property developed first. As you can guess, we're expecting it will be heavily contaminated. And with respect to Block 105, there is also some contamination in that area, and the owner has had little to no interest in making it available for industrial activity. Whereas Link Mill site, very, very happy to entertain some development there if we wanted to move on that.
Well, when I mentioned the auto wrecker site, I don't mean the auto wrecker itself. That whole area is somewhat semi-industrial already. And when I talk about Block 105, the city already owns the property on the corner of Ship Creek and where Anderson joins the old garbage dump. And of course, it's talking about contamination. No, God knows what's under there. But I think we own a fairly good chunk of land in and around that area, do we not?
We do, and we've walked it on several occasions. Again, when we've entertained an industrial land inquiry, we've gone to the site to see for ourselves whether there was enough room to accommodate a development there or a project there. And other than the land that we are currently using and which the Public Works Department told me don't even think about it. The rest of the property that we own up there is very steep. And so we took that off the table. And yes, there is lots of other industrially zoned or even utilized property in the Sherwood area. And again, the owners were pushing back saying, look, if there's going to be some further industrial development here, we'd like to see the auto wrecker site developed first.
Okay. Other questions from council? Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I couldn't find it because at my fingertips, but I do remember reading about some possibility of the old Gill School site. Has the city ever considered purchasing that site for some light manufacturing that might be of interest to somebody? I think the school district could be open and willing to negotiate and sell that site.
We actually did talk to them about the site back in 2018 when we had 3 inquiries in a very short period of time for a food manufacturing operation. Each of them different. One was around plant protein. One was around noodles, and one was around candy and infused edibles. And we did go to the school district and ask if there was interest in making the property available. And essentially it became, we're still contemplating the future of the site. I think if any one of the three parties that we were making inquiries on behalf of had come and put an offer down on the table, then the school district may have been more interested in making that site available. But even subsequent to that, we went back with another inquiry, and again, it was, we're not certain that we're ready to declare the site surplus just yet.
Thank you. Other questions from council? Okay, Pat, could you let me know what kind of direction, if any, you're looking for today?
Madam Mayor, through you to the whole of council, if there are other actions that you've seen that we could include in this inventory and action plan, we'd be happy to hear it. I will take the questions that have been raised as some direction to further take a look at the property around block 105, the property around Sherwood, and the Gill School site to see about their availability. And if there are any other actions that sites or actions that council would like to recommend, suggest, we'd be happy to include them. As the report notes, this is a joint venture project with the regional district, and on Wednesday, the report is going to them for their consideration and their recommendation. And what we're hoping we will find in the regional district is that the directors will identify some additional parcels that are not zoned industrial, but might nevertheless be considered for industrial. So that the request of council today is there anything else you would like us to consider in implementing and considering that this be a milestone with the project and then moving on into action?
Thank you. So I think we've had, some good comments brought forward today. And I think I'm personally happy to hear that the comment that there is a willingness on Mosaic's part to explore options on the Link Mill site if the right opportunity comes along, because I know there hasn't always been. So I think just that alone is a positive step forward. So I think for now, council, let's receive this as information and look forward to hearing the regional district discussion this week, and then having further conversations about this as we move forward. Would somebody like to move receipt?
Move receipt.
Okay, is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Solda. Any other comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. So thanks for the work that's been done on this. And it's something that council has asked about often. And now that we have it, I'm sure people will be rereading over it and will be coming back with more questions and thoughts on moving forward. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
We'll move on now to bylaws, and our first item from the Manager of Planning, zoning map amendments. Moving forward on the 14th and Anderson city residential applications. And I think this is just the third and final reading, so maybe just a really quick overview. Do we have the Manager of Planning on?
Oh, can you hear me there?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Sorry about that. I was having a weird technological moment there. So, okay. All right. So before you for consideration today is the third and final reading of bylaw text amendments to the zoning bylaw, which would affect the 8 listed subject properties. So after selling these properties, the city has initiated a rezoning application on behalf of the property owners. And as such, the proposed land use would change from future development to R1 single family residential zone. The rezoning is consistent with the policy and land use designation specified in the city's official community plan. So rezoning from FD to R1 essentially really further restricts the principal uses, but allows for a larger maximum lot coverage. Otherwise, the majority of the site development regulations are consistent between future development and the R1 zone, including minimum setbacks, maximum height, and maximum number of stories. So really this rezoning helps ensure that the lots will be used for single family development and will be permitted in such a way, a form and character that is consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. At the January 25th regular council meeting, City Council chose to waive the public hearing for this development application because it is consistent with the official community plan. Notice for the proposed rezoning was placed in 2 consecutive issues of the newspaper, and the notice was also mailed to residents and property owners within 75 meters of the subject property. And finally, notice was also placed on the subject properties as well. The planning department has only received 1 public inquiry with regards to the rezoning application. And this member of the public expressed concern more so with the development application process and the limited opportunities for public input, noting that it's a bit of a less conventional rezoning process than maybe what the city would usually undertake. However, no specific opposition to the change in land use was expressed. Overall, the planning department supports the proposed zoning bylaw map amendments as the proposal is consistent with the official community plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Washington, would you like to read these motions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the zoning amendment number 44, 14th Avenue and Anderson Avenue, City Residential, bylaw number 5024 be read a 3rd time.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Poon. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried, thank you.
And that the zoning amendment number 44, 14th Avenue and Anderson Avenue, City Residential, bylaw number 5024 be finally adopted, signed by the mayor and the corporate office, and numbered 5024.
Second.
And seconded by Councillor Poon. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. And item number 2 under bylaws from the Manager of Planning is just the final reading of the Rainbow Gardens housing agreement. Council, are there any questions on this one? It is just the final reading, so we've been through it a few times. Councillor Solda, are you able to read that motion?
Madam Mayor, I move that the housing agreement 6151 Russell Place, Rainbow Gardens, bylaw number 5021 be now finally adopted, signed by the mayor and corporate officer, and numbered 5021.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Poon. Any final questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And item number 3 from the Director of Finance, we have the 5-year financial plan 2021 to 2025, bylaw number 5023 for second reading with some suggested amendments. Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So in front of you today is some recommendations for the 2021-2025 financial plan as far as amendments prior to second reading. So in the last couple of weeks, we've noted that staff would like to add a $20,000 increase to engineering and consulting to support an ICBC network screening study And this would be a 50-50 funding share with ICBC. Also, there is a deferral of some capital projects. So one is the fire department, the 2006 Ford F550 rescue truck, number 8. This would be pushed back into 2022. And we would provide the recommendation that the $35,400 assigned from taxation in 2021 be continued and then put into the IRF to be expended in 2022. Also with the dump box on the number 241, this one is something that can be repaired after further investigation. So we're pushing that expenditure off and we will repair that box and continue to use that for 241. Another addition was the $86,000 for the Uplands Park that would be used through the development cost charges. So this is a project that was identified but was not included in the draft financial plan as presented in the last month and a half. So that needs to be included. This was something that was agreed upon for the development of those properties on Bird. And finally, there's a request for early adoption of some projects that are beneficial to the city if we can proceed with those at an earlier date in the year. And that includes the Coal Creek Phase 4, which would be combined with the Coal Creek Phase 3 project to provide a larger project and the opportunity for more bids, likely. And the Cowichan Reservoir Trunk Main is another project that has been identified and request for early adoption prior to our final adoption of the financial plan. So with that, Council has the option to allow staff to proceed with the project and in both the Coal Creek Phase 3 and 4 at once and the Cowichan Reservoir Trunk Main prior to the final adoption. So.
Thank you for that. Council, are there questions? Councillor Solda and then Councillor Haggard.
Madam Mayor, I'm just kind of curious to know what ICBC network screening study is. I'm not too sure. I can guess, but that's...
Thank you. Rob, if you want to go ahead, if you're prepared to answer that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The network screening study is basically a partnership with ICBC looking at about 20 to 30 of our more our intersections with more accident data, more accidents per se, and refining those down to about 5 or 10 intersections, looking at them in detail and then coming up with possible solutions to improve safety at those intersections. And what we would do with that is potentially create a program where we wouldn't be able to afford to fix all of these intersections at once, but over a 10-year or 5-year program, we could spend an amount once we have an idea how much would make sense with council per year and slowly upgrade these. And then as new intersections come into our line of sight because of either accident data or members of the public seeing some near misses type of information, we can add those into the queue and keep that program going with new intersection data and keep looking at them so that we're always focusing on the intersections that have the most accidents and have the most safety concerns, so we aren't reactive in the future. So this really helps us be proactive. And ICBC and as well as other grant opportunities will look at that really favorably in that they'll want to support our grants applications more because we're being more proactive and they recognize that we're prioritizing those intersections. So it really helps with the grants as well.
So Madam Mayor, just to update on that, would Bird Street be a potential crosswalk? Would they be looking at that? Because there's so much development on there. And also we have like the Johnson Road and also Beaver Creek. Would they be also looked at?
Councillor Solda, I think this is the point of the study, would be for ICBC to do that work rather than us to speculate which ones may or may not need work to be done so that we could be strategic and intentional and knowledge-based when we're moving forward with our decisions. Thank you for that, Rob. That's very helpful. Councillor Corbeil, I think I saw your hand go up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, first of all, Rob, that's great news. And I hope that they're going to measure the amount of light at these intersections in the evenings, because just to me look like there's not enough light cast from those orange lights that we use. Could somebody elaborate on this Uplands Park? Is that actually building a new park? And if so, where would that be?
Andrew?
So I might, I'm not sure if I can answer the details on that question, whether I need to refer back to the Director of Parks and Rec and Heritage, but I can get that answer to you and provide that to Council.
Thank you. Scott, do you have additional information to provide on that?
Well, I don't have the details, but I do know as part of that subdivision, a small area was designated as park, and playground equipment was, children's playground equipment was purchased. So I'm assuming it's that it's the children's playground equipment that is referred to. But as Andrew indicated, the Director of Parks and Recreation might know more details. But I do know that as part of that development, it was anticipated that a children's playground would be installed, and that a piece of land was designated to the city for that purpose.
Thank you. And it is in the Uplands 2 development,
yes.
Just for clarity.
Yeah.
Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question was regarding Uplands Park as well, because I know at one time we had talked about having less parks in the community and having maybe more larger destination parks instead of a lot of these small community parks. So I was quite surprised to see it in there. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's probably worth getting information from the Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage at the next meeting as to what the background is on this. I know that I've been hearing about this park for a while, but hadn't seen it in our budget. So yeah, it looks like it's coming from development cost charges, but I'd be curious to see a bit more information on that as well. Okay, other questions from council? Okay, let's see. Councillor Paulson, would you like to make the motions here? So there's two separate motions. The first one is long.
The first one, the council directs staff to amend the City of Port Alberni 2021-2025 financial plan bylaw number 5023 as follows. Subsection 1, add $20,000 to line 23121, engineering consultant services, to support ICBC network screening study funding at a 50-50 cost share using prior year surplus. Point 2, defer the capital purchase to replace the fire department 2006 Ford F-550 rescue truck number 8 into the 2022 capital plan and contribute $35,400 assigned from taxation into the equipment replacement reserve fund. Number 3, remove the capital purchase of the dump box number 241 with the funding to remain within the equipment replacement reserve fund. Number 4, do we want to go ahead with this before you have your report, or just do it?
I think if it's our choice, we could leave it out for now and we could add it in at a future meeting if council would like to get information on it first.
I think I'll read it. You know, the fact that it's come from DCCs makes sense. Anyway, number 4, add Uplands Park, $86,000 to come from the development cost charge fund for parks. Number 5, approve early adoption for capital projects. A, Coal Creek Phase 4, $1,547,000, and B, Cowichan Reservoir Trunk Main, $1,386,000.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
Thank you. And council, any further comments on these? Okay, sorry, I'm having a little bit of freezing going on, so just making sure I'm not missing anyone. I don't see any hands still. So council, on this motion to amend, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And you can go ahead to Councillor Paulson.
Number 2, that the City of Port Alberni 2021-2025 Financial Plan Bylaw number 5023 be given second reading as amended.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Poon. And council, before we vote on this one, I did just want to share some exciting budget news. Doesn't impact actually needing to change our budget, but that we heard today that we were successful in our grant application for, and we're allowed to make this public now, we were successful in our grant application for the revitalization of the train station. So $390,000 that we'll be receiving. Really exciting. Minister, I was actually on the phone with Minister Josie Osborne when I received the email that we were successful in that funding, and it is her ministry. So I expressed our thanks to her and the provincial government, and just really exciting to see that project coming to fruition. There'll be some more steps in working with the Heritage Network and a lot more planning, of course, but a significant receipt of grants. So very excited about that. So with that, seeing no final comments on second reading, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And thanks, Andrew, for the information. Moving on to correspondence for action. I don't see any pieces of correspondence for action. So proclamations, we have one item from the BC Lymphedema Association, an email dated February 5th requesting that March 6th, 2021 be proclaimed as Lymphedema Awareness Day in Port Alberni. Would somebody like to make that proclamation? Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Paulson. Any questions or comments on this one? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. And we have correspondence for information. Twyla.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So to summarize, you have 10 items of correspondence. First letter is from Mr. Thompson, and he's speaking about the air quality in the valley, suggesting having a wood stove exchange program is good, but only if people take advantage of it. With strict bylaws in place, it can and will reduce the pollution in the valley, but they must be enforced. There will also be those who will be reluctant to change, but there is a saying, it's hard to change an attitude, but much easier to create a new one. So he's just wrapping that up. It's time to clean up the air in the valley. We have a communication from Fortis BC where it talks about a number of items, one of which includes their advanced gas meter project update, another ongoing consultation and joint use opportunities, and as well as upcoming information session being held on February, which is after the fact now, so I'll remain silent on that one. We have a communication from Shirley Arts, and she is essentially expressing concerns over the reduced hours at the Aquatic Center. We have a communication from BC Resilience and an Adaptation Workshop extending an invitation to council to participate in their 2-hour virtual interactive event taking place on Tuesday, March 9th. We have correspondence from Laura Morrissey, and she is just commenting about the recent cuts in hours at the Aquatic Center and perhaps lack of attention to trail maintenance and garbage cans along the log train trail. We have another communication from a resident of the community who is speaking about encouraging council to have the McLean Mill monies and the Key to Key project go to a referendum. We have a letter from another resident expressing an interest in the an area of the off-leash dog park being designated for small dogs only. We have correspondence signed by 5 doctors regarding the reduction in pool hours and the importance of pool use. And we have correspondence from Kathleen Sogi, concerns over the reduced hours at the Aquatic Center. And lastly, we have the minutes from the Alberni Valley Museum and Heritage Commission.
Thank you very much. Are there questions or comments councillors would like to make on those items? Councillor Paulson and then Haggard.
I guess I'd just like to make a comment on the air quality letter from Mr. Thompson. And just so people don't think we're standing still on this, I remember an initiative that was championed by our now mayor, but at that time councilor, with regards to wood burning within the city limits. And certainly that is banned 365 days a year now. So I just wanted to bring that back out. That's been a fairly recent development. And also that the regional district is working on a new burning policy as well. So just so people are assured that we're paying attention and moving forward in those areas. So we're just not standing idle on that issue. So just thought I'd bring that up. We're doing some good work too.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Councillor Paulson. And I remember when we brought that forward and took it on as a municipal issue, that we really had no buy-in from the regional areas. And we talked about that on our council, that it would be a challenge, that, you know, we would be restricting burning within the city of Port Alberni, and the ACRD would not be doing the same in the outlying areas. And it just shows how far we've come in a couple of years, a few short years, where now we have the ACRD, you know, not quite there yet, but making it a top priority to get their burning bylaws in place as well, recognizing that they have work to do to improve the air quality in the valley. So I think the conversation we started with that bylaw that we created a few years ago is now going to end up being valley-wide and hopefully making a significant impact. Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is more a procedural question. I noticed that in one of the letters included in correspondence is signed by a city resident for 40 years. And when I inquired about that, why we're including correspondence without having a name attached to it, and the Director of Corporate Services that it is according to our policy. And I'm sorry, Twilight, I don't remember the policy number that you quoted, but yet when you have public input and question period, people are required to state their name and their address. So it seems to be two very conflicting policies that we have. So my concern is that if we're printing letters in our public agenda, that people should be required to have their names. And if that is policy, maybe we should look at changing our policy. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Twyla, any comments to add?
Yeah, just so in response to that, I believe our emails perhaps have crossed Councillor Haggard. It's actually not a policy, but it's actually in Council's procedure bylaw. And I had suggested there is some ambiguity given the electronic procedure format now. And when we do receive something, it can't not always be signed. So as long as we have an email address, we can accept that. What I suggest, though, is council may wish to review their procedure bylaw in the near future and to cover these things off. But procedure bylaw, not the policy per se.
Thank you. I think that's a great suggestion. Any other items? Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want some clarity on the wood burning. Seems to me this has been brought up before, and there was some confusion regarding who was enforcing the bylaws. Was it the bylaw department or was it the fire hall? And in fact, there were things like the wood can't be, it has to be at least 20% moisture content and all this stuff that must be extremely difficult to enforce. And now I'm hearing that there are no wood burning. Like, clarify that for me, please. I still believe that there's wood burning stoves all over the place, but it's very, very difficult to enforce the bylaws that we have.
Could you clarify your comment on no wood burning?
No outdoor wood burning.
Oh, yeah.
Wood stoves are a totally different bylaw, and yeah, you're right. They're difficult to, and I think you can have some backyard fires, but they have to be within a certain circumference as well. But I think we're referring mostly to waste burning.
Yes, thank you. There's no land clearing building permitted within the city of Port Alberni. So there's, cooking fires and campfires are permitted. But the bylaw Councillor Paulson was referring to was about land clearing.
But as far as the wood stoves go, that's where there's quite a difficulty in enforcing the bylaw. We've got a bylaw that's next to impossible to enforce.
Yep, so that could be worth reviewing as well, absolutely. And I know that the wood stove exchange has had, it's facilitated through the regional district, not the city, but it has had limited uptake the last couple of years. So Councillor Paulson and I could certainly bring that to the regional district to continue the conversation and see if there's an update there that needs to be done.
There's also a piece in that bylaw that refers to when homes are sold, that the older wood stoves need to be identified. And I don't know if there's any way of, I don't know, does real estate look at that when there's a transaction in real estate? I don't know, but it's, again, looks like a wonderful bylaw, but in reality, I don't think it's working.
There's definitely there's definitely a lot of steps that do take place when a home is sold around certifications and things like that. So, but again, I'm not sure on the follow through of that. And we certainly as a municipality wouldn't have a direct awareness of when properties are being sold. So something to review for sure. Would somebody like to move receipt of the correspondence?
Move receipt of correspondence.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Paulson. And seeing no further comments, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And move on to report from in camera. So we'll go to the Corporate Services Officer. We have the APC and then the letter from Mike Rattan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just to report out that Council earlier today proceeded with appointing Jill McQuaid to the Advisory Planning Commission for a 2-year term starting today and concluding December 31st of 2022. Council at their in-camera meeting this morning also authorized the release of a letter received by M. Rattan as it spoke to representing the Alberni Waterfront Employers Association regarding Council's consideration of an industrial revitalization accord or taxation strategy.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on that release of information? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to council reports. Are there any items that councillors would like to highlight? Councillor Poon.
Thank you. In my report, I noted my attendance at the Air Quality Council meeting. I didn't mention in the report, but there is a big effort all across the valley to monitor air quality. And also coming up, there's a BC Lung Association workshop called Air Quality and Health, which may be of interest to some people. That's March 3rd, and people can check it out on the BC Lung Association website. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other items people would like to highlight? Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple things. I talk in my report, and this was the first report I've done in a number of meetings, simply because I finally have something to report. But I did meet with a couple folks regarding the 10th and Redford property and coming up with some development plans. And I just want to thank the social justice class from ADSS that put together a map of what this may look like. We've enhanced it somewhat and passed it through to Twyla, and hopefully it's making its way back to Suncor and going through the different avenues there. I also talked about being at the Alberni Valley Learning Center or Learning Council meeting, and Bill Brown from the BC Works brought up an initiative that they're looking at. It's a grant called the Sectorial Initiatives Program, and the Island Work Transition is going to be the lead applicant along with North Island College partnering for this. And it's where the discussion kind of, at least in my view, I was talking about the homelessness and the feasibility of potentially building tiny houses and how North Island College could be involved with that. Whether that comes to fruition or not through this grant, I don't know, but it's sort of based on what they did out on the West Coast to develop kind of a post-pandemic recovery plan. And it's a fairly lengthy program. This could be up to 3 years. And I think Bill's looking for more community partners to be involved in this, but it's quite exciting. I think it has to be in by March the 3rd or 4th. So there's quite a time crunch for this. Lastly, I was at the West Island Woodlands Advisory Group meeting just on February 11th. And there was a discussion about the waste residue. And unfortunately, there's quite they've ramped up the cost of the stumpage on any waste left behind in the bush. And the thinking was that it would create more fiber going to the pulp and paper mills. And unfortunately, that's probably not really happening, other than the forest companies are paying a higher rate for their waste they're leaving behind. And I noticed recently that the community of Prince George has put together something, and maybe this is something that Pat could look and see if it makes any sense for us to look at, where they've identified that the forestry is a very important sector in Prince George, much like it is here in Port Alberni. And they're doing a study on how they could best help the forest industry. And when I heard about this waste being left on the ground and not being brought to the mill, there's so many avenues. There's something called the Forest Enhancement Society that funded fiber from terrace to go to Harmac. So maybe it would be valuable for us as a community to try to look for initiatives that can help the forest industry. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thanks very much for that. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to allude that it is 5 p.m. and I know Councillor Solda has an item under new business, so I guess we need a motion to continue past 5 o'clock.
I'll move that we extend beyond 5 o'clock.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Washington, I think. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And thanks, Councillor Corbeil, for that report. I think the Kofi convention is coming up very soon, electronically, of course, but I think a lot of what you're talking about, there'll be some relevant sessions for us to attend there and, connect with more communities on how they're approaching some of these challenges and opportunities as well. Okay. Would somebody like to move receipt of council reports?
Move receipt.
Moved by Councillor Poon, seconded by Councillor Washington. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And so, Councillor Solda, if you want to read out, do you have a motion or a notice of motion?
A notice of motion. Okay, so Madam Mayor, I move that council direct staff to amend the City of Port Alberni Financial Plan 2021-2025 Financial Plan Bylaw number 5023 to establish a contingency fund for the purpose of reserving monies for the future replacement of Echo Aquatic Center pool.
Thank you. So a notice of motion doesn't require a seconder. It'll be printed on our next agenda for us to discuss at our next regular meeting of council. Moving on then to question period. Oh, sorry, Councillor Poon.
So I don't know if this falls under new business, but I think previously I had we had directed staff to look into exploring bus route options to the East Coast. And I wonder if that's still in the works or what's happening with that, because I understand that the bus transport company has suspended service. So I think we need to look into that.
Thank you. Twyla, do you want to comment on that at all? Or Councillor Poon could request a report or something for the next meeting?
Actually, I can provide an update. We had referred that to the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District just to get their, if they were willing to want to go into a partnership and review this option with the city. That is with the ACRD right now, and they were adding it to their strategic planning discussions. So I can certainly reach out to have a follow-up from the staff at the ACRD.
That would be great. And I will just share as well that I've been connecting with some Comox Valley and Courtney councillors on this, and Councillor Poon maybe has been as well. There is certainly a push for other communities to push the province to connect into, or to connect to the island by bus, certainly because of the struggles that we're seeing. The Tofino bus has been canceled since the beginning of December. And of course, the future of the whole system is certainly in question at this point. So I think that especially if other communities are looking to connect, we know that already Nanaimo, Parksville, Qualicum are connected. Ladysmith is looking to tie into that connection, which would then open up connection all the way to Duncan. Courtney Comox is looking to tie into that as well. I don't want our community to be the community that's left out. I think that having our island connected by bus would be incredibly valuable, bus in a more affordable and accessible way for everyone. So thanks for that, Councillor Poon. And we will make sure that we follow up on where that with the regional district. Councillor Paulson.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that Wilson's will be a delegation to the regional district on Wednesday. That's Tofino bus lines, but over and above Wilson's that owns Tofino bus lines, we probably should have a chat with BC Transit here in the near future, whether they come as a delegation or maybe just a working group.
For sure. And Councillor Paulson, you wouldn't have been a part of the discussions, but Councillor Haggard and I were a part of the discussions that the regional district was having with BC Transit. Those discussions, of course, were focused around the Sprout Lake and Alberni Valley connection, but there was conversations brought up as well about connecting to the east and west coast and just the value of transit generally. And staying connected to the greater island system. So I think that with the risk of our bus service being further interrupted, our connecting system, there's going to be more pressure put on the provincial government, and I certainly like to see us join with other communities to make that request. So thanks for bringing that forward, Councillor Poon. We'll start with getting an update from the regional district more formally through staff, and then we can determine next steps once we have that. And I'll go to the corporate services officer now for question period.
Yes, we have one submission from Mr. Fraser and two questions, and they both relate to the $2 million dividend funds that were provided to the city through the community forest. Question one, could you please tell me where the $2 million is placed? And two, if any of it is earmarked for anything, and if so, what? And I know I could probably send this over to our Director of Finance, who might be able to provide an answer to those two questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So what we have with the dividend is an ability to put it into a restricted reserve. So that monies go into a specific reserve that are restricted based on the policies for that reserve. And the only things that are committed through that reserve at this time are the community investment program funds, which are $10,000 per year.
Thank you. And I'll just add to that I have met a couple of times with the Community Forest Board because our reserved fund bylaw does state that we will engage the Community Forest Board prior to making decisions on those reserve funds. So of course, we have the final decision of where that money goes, but we have made a commitment to the board to engage with them prior. And when they've asked that question as well, I have said that council has not allocated those funds and has not made decisions yet about where they're going to be going. So we certainly will be following a process when we do get to the point of making decisions about those funds. Okay, so assuming no more questions, would somebody like to move adjournment?
Move adjournment.
Moved by Councillor Poon, seconded by Councillor Solda. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.